Are you ready to hear a story that will give you goosebumps? If you are, hit that like button to boost your courage, share to warn your friends, and subscribe to our channel so you won't miss any chilling tales from us. Now then, let the story begin.
No one in our county builds basements. Granite says no. The bedrock sits under the grass like a clenched jaw. And every contractor learns the same lesson by their second summer. Dig more than a few feet and you hit stone. That's the consolation prize we give ourselves after every late night tremor on the news. If the fault ever wakes up, at least we're bolted to the anvil. People here repeat it like grace before dinner. Our house was the kind of place a person stops noticing once they've paid enough months of mortgage on time. Nothing special. Vinyl siding that looked white until you parked beside new white. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, you had to shoulder the door to latch. A kitchen that clogged with sunlight at 4 in the afternoon. No creaks. Not even when the wind jackknifed through the eucalyptus. The inspection had been clean. The roof was solid, and the slab, God bless the slab, sat level as a prayer book on the granite. My wife and I are not good with money. We say this out loud because turning a weakness into a joke makes it feel smaller, like folding a bill you can't afford into a crane and calling it art. We met in a casino with ceilings painted to look like the sky. She was 2 amarettos in and beating me at a slot machine without even meaning to. I was pretending I had a system. There's a way the brain warms at the thought of a life that might turn on a single coin. You could call that warmth, hope. You could also call it a fever. 7 years of that. Work, bills, and weekends of tiny risks. A scratcher, a card, a spin. Every Tuesday, we watched Mega Millions with our knees touching and our numbers inked in the same pen like we were promising each other something brave. We told ourselves we weren't chasing fortune. We were courting the thrill that lived one hinge beyond reality. A door you could maybe tip open with the right hunch. What if is such a soft question. It sounds like a lullaby until you listen closely and realize there's something else breathing along with it. The first time I heard the whirring, it was just past 3. I woke the way you wake when a hotel air conditioner shudders alive. A change in the room's intention. The air starting to do a job it didn't have a moment ago. My wife mumbled, "AC?" I listened harder. It wasn't the vent. It wasn't wind. It was a low mechanical spin, like someone had turned on a fan inside a plastic bag. Cautious at first, and then confidently, as if it had been waiting for us to sleep. I slid out of bed and pressed my ear to the carpet. The floor was cool in a way it never was. Cool like a breath held. The whirring came up through the slab, soft as a secret. There was no rattle in the walls. Nothing screamed. No vibrating glass. The sound lived directly below my head. Right where thousands of pounds of poured concrete lay on the rock that had denied every basement in a 50-mile radius. When the whir stopped, it didn't wind down. It cut the thud. The sudden quiet rang. "Water pipes," she said, face turned into her pillow. "They knock sometimes." "Under the slab?" I asked. "Please," she said, voice already receding. "It's nothing." We fell back asleep because that's what you do when there isn't a next step that makes sense. You shelve the impossible until morning can make a different kind of sense for you. For a while, the house remembered how to be a house. Days went long with errands, nights folded around television. One evening, We spread cartons of Chinese across the coffee table and performed the ritual of failure in front of the lottery drawing. Not a single number matched. It felt personal. I muted the TV out of spite. "You ever think we should quit?" she asked, lips shining with sauce. "Just stop buying the dream?" "Shh," I said, which was rude, and I regretted it instantly, except my ear had already tilted toward the floor. The muted TV had made a new shape out of the room, and inside that shape, something else moved. The sound wasn't a whir this time. It was a murmur. "What?" she said, quieter now, which is the way people talk when they're afraid the thing you're hearing might hear them back. I slid to the carpet without answering. That coolness again. A hush so concentrated it made my teeth ache. Faint and far and wrong, there were voices. Not language you could pass, but the cadence of it. Rises, falls. A conversational rhythm soaked in water and pushed through stone. One voice was slightly higher than the other. The lower one carried a chuckle that didn't laugh so much as pulse. Then, another sound. Tick, 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 regular as a metronome in a sick room. The hair on my arms lifted like iron shavings finding a magnet. We ate the rest of our food in the kitchen with our shoes on. I turned the TV back up. The noise stayed down where it belonged. Beneath explanation, under the part of the world where you can walk to a breaker panel and flip something and say, "There, fixed." I made appointments. Inspectors came with boots and flashlights and the bored swagger of men who've seen everything. They tapped the slab and frowned in a way that felt expensive. They crawled the crawl space that doesn't exist here because there isn't a crawl space here. They leaned against door frames and told me in different words that our house sat on granite and nothing sat under our house. One, a man with a ring tattooed on his finger where a ring had used to be, said sometimes folks convince themselves because they want a problem somebody else can solve. He left a brochure for pest control anyway, and the traps the pest guy set stayed clean, like little altars to the absence of rats. "Let it go," my wife said finally, and she said it with both arms around me, rubbing the knots out of my back with the same fingers that had beaten my slot machine years ago. Houses make noises. Your brain makes them worse. Please, baby, don't chase it. That night, I tried not to listen. I tried so hard I could hear my own blood. When the house stayed quiet, I didn't sleep. The silence felt posed, like a field after snow when you know the fox is crouched under the pine, holding its breath, because it knows you are too. I pictured something that wasn't sound but intent. Something pressed flat under us, ear to the slab, counting our inhales the way a dealer counts chips. Politely, professionally, with a small smile. I lasted a handful of weeks like that, hollow on coffee and denial, before the house stopped pretending to be a house. It was a Tuesday again, late, a kind of tired that made the hallway lean. I stepped into the living room for water and stopped because the geometry of the room had changed. The living room is a simple diagram. Front door, window, the square mouth of the kitchen. But now there was a third opening where there had never been one, sunk into the wall, not like a new door, added to a plan, but like an old door finally remembering what it was for. Black beyond it. Not night black, but a depth that had nothing to do with light. And within that unlight, angled down like a tongue into a throat, stairs. I didn't call her name. I didn't turn on the lamp. The air was molasses and I moved through it, every step a little permission, every permission a bet. I reached the threshold and felt colder air feather my ankles from below. A hand closed around my bicep. "Don't," my wife whispered behind me. Her nails were gentle. Her breath shook. "Please, come back to bed." The word was small and absolute, and it should have been enough. It wasn't. For 2 days, the stairs lingered in my mind, like the aftertaste of something metallic. I didn't see them again. Not in the dim fish tank light of the living room. Not even in the dream-spliced fragments of my half-sleep. But they were there, in the architecture of my thoughts. Every time my wife's back turned, I felt the ghost of her hand still around my arm. The way it had tightened when she said "don't." And there was something else in that grip. Recognition, maybe. Like she knew the weight of the air spilling from that stairwell as intimately as I had felt it. She didn't mention it again. Neither did I. But silence doesn't bury things. It plants them. The next time it happened, it was daylight. I was in the kitchen, washing 2 bowls from lunch, when I heard it again. A sound swelling up from beneath the floor, slow and steady. Not the whirring from before. This time, the cadence was clear. Tap, 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 pause, tap, tap. Like someone testing the edge of a nail against glass. I froze, bowl halfway submerged in suds, staring at the tile like I might see the grout between it tremble. Then came the voices, clearer than ever, the words almost forming before they blurred into each other, warped by the density of the slab. I dried my hands and crouched low, pressing my ear to the cold ceramic. The chill bit deeper than usual. "Close?" one voice asked. Not mine, not my wife's. "She nearly ready," answered another, smooth and deep, carrying a strange music under the syllables. I jerked my head up, heart pounding. The kitchen was empty, except for the hum of the fridge and the slow drip from the faucet. That was when the tapping changed. It wasn't random anymore. It was... No. It was matching something. 3 taps, a pause, 2 taps. I realized my own fingers had been drumming against the floor absent-mindedly, in the same rhythm. I hadn't meant to. The noise below had found me. I pushed myself back, palms sweaty, and forced a laugh that didn't sound like mine. "Rats," I muttered to the empty air. "Just rats." But rats don't talk, and rats don't tap back. That night, my wife was reading in bed when I asked her outright, "You ever hear anything, from below?" She didn't look up. "Below what?" "You know what I mean. The slab." A small smile played at the corner of her mouth. "You're still thinking about it. It's not just thinking. It's happening." She turned the page of her book without answering. Her eyes moving but not reading. That page turn sounded like a verdict. "I'm not going there with you." The days blurred. Each time the sounds came, they grew sharper, closer, like something was ascending toward me from inside the granite itself. I started running small experiments, pressing my ear to different parts of the floor, turning off all the appliances, even lying flat on my stomach at night with my palms spread on the boards. Once, I swore I felt vibration, faint but deliberate. It pulsed once, twice, then stopped, like a single heartbeat in stone. On the 5th night of this private obsession, the voices returned stronger than ever. They weren't muffled anymore. They were hushed. It's... Watching. ready soon. I pressed closer, holding my breath, and then, "We hear you." The words shot through me like a cold wire. I fell back, scrambling away, my shoulder slamming into the couch. My wife stirred in the bedroom, but didn't call out. I didn't sleep at all. The third doorway appeared again 2 nights later. No fanfare, no flicker of light. Just there, cut clean into the wall. The stairs yawning down into black. This time I didn't walk toward them. I stood at the edge of the room, staring, and felt an absurd certainty bloom in my chest. They want me to come down. It was almost magnetic. The air spilling from the darkness was thicker than the air in the rest of the room, cooler, but with a weight to it, like being underwater. I took 1 step forward, then another. The smell reached me, wet metal, old dust, and something like copper pennies held too long in the mouth. I was halfway across the living room when her voice came again. "Don't." She was standing in the hallway in that same loose robe, hair spilling down her shoulders, eyes locked to mine with an intensity that cut through the cold like a blade. "Please," she said, "stay here. Stay with me." I stopped. My pulse was loud enough to drown out thought. And yet, there was something in her tone this time. Not fear for me. Not exactly. It was fear of me. I let her lead me back to bed again, and I lay awake staring at the ceiling until dawn. The stairs were waiting. I knew it, and the tapping below was getting impatient. It was past midnight when I decided, not in a sudden burst of courage, but in the slow, creeping certainty that comes when you've stared at the same thought so long. It stops feeling dangerous and starts feeling inevitable. My wife's breathing had steadied into the rhythm of sleep. The room was washed in a thin spill of moonlight, the kind that makes every familiar object look slightly wrong. I slid from under the covers, my movements rehearsed in silence. The living room was darker than the hallway, but I didn't need light to know the stairs would be there. I felt them before I saw them. The air, heavier than it should be, colder against my face. And then, there they were. The black opening, the angled line vanishing downward, the suggestion of a depth that had no business existing in this house or any house built on granite. I stood at the threshold for a long time, 1 foot on the first step, listening. The noise from below wasn't voices this time. It was a slow, deliberate breathing. It took me a moment to realize the breaths were synced with mine. I whispered an apology, though I'm not sure if it was to my wife or to myself, and I began to descend. The steps were narrow and old, the kind of old that wasn't about years but about wrongness, as if they'd been waiting here far longer than the house above had existed, wearing themselves down in anticipation of my weight. Every footfall landed with a muted thud that didn't echo upward or downward, as though the stairwell absorbed sound like a sponge. My heartbeat was loud in my ears. Halfway down, I noticed something strange. The air smelled faintly of our kitchen, garlic from dinner, the sweet, plasticky scent of the lottery tickets we'd left on the counter. The familiar clung to me, even here. That comfort lasted until I reached the bottom. I stepped onto a landing, and the dark seemed to peel back. Not with light, but with recognition. My eyes adjusted, and my stomach dropped. I was in my living room. The same couch, the same coffee table, the same crooked picture frame, only it wasn't quite the same. The fish tank was gone. The shelf where it had been now held 3 books I didn't recognize. The curtains were a darker blue, and the air smelled just slightly off, like the space had been cleaned with something floral and cheap. From the hallway, my wife's voice drifted out. "There you are." She stood there, in the robe, exactly as I'd left her, except the way her smile lingered didn't feel like her at all. She reached for my hand and led me back to bed without another word. For a day or two, I told myself it had been a dream. A vivid, unsettling dream, born of sleepless nights and obsessive thoughts. But the little differences nagged at me. The missing fish tank, the curtains, the faint smell of cleaner that hadn't been there before. And then there were the bigger changes. At work, my manager's name tag no longer had the accent mark I'd seen every day for the last 3 years. Our next-door neighbors had a new car I'd never seen them drive before. And this was the one that truly chilled me. There was a house at the end of the street that hadn't been there yesterday. When I brought it up to my wife, she looked genuinely puzzled. "Are you feeling okay?" she asked. "You're talking like we've lost time or something." The worst part, I didn't know how to answer her. The sounds returned, louder and more insistent. One night, as I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, the tapping began again. But this time it was coming from above. 3 taps. Pause. 2 taps. I knew that rhythm now. I sat up slowly, listening as the pattern repeated, and then, just once, a whisper. "Come back." I didn't wait for morning. The stairs were waiting for me again, as if they had always been there. As if I could call them into being simply by wanting them badly enough. This time I didn't hesitate. The descent felt faster, though the steps seemed endless. My heartbeat was calmer. My breathing matched the pulse of the air around me. At the bottom, I stepped into my living room again. Only now, the missing fish tank didn't bother me, because I couldn't remember ever having one. The curtains were white. The couch cushions sagged more than they should have. And from the kitchen, I could hear my wife humming a song I didn't know she knew. I turned toward the sound and found myself smiling. For the first time, I realized the stairs hadn't brought me home. They'd taken me somewhere close. Close enough to trick me. Close enough to keep me coming back. It's strange how quickly you can get used to the wrong version of home. After the second descent, I stopped trying to convince myself it was a dream. I stopped asking my wife if she noticed things had changed. The way she looked at me, too still, too careful, told me she was either lying or didn't remember. Either way, I knew the truth. The stairs were rewriting the world. And yet, I kept going. The third time was just 3 nights later. I couldn't wait. There was no big moment of temptation or inner struggle. I just woke up, saw the darkness pooling in the living room corner where the stairs would be, and went. The descent was quicker now. The air didn't feel as cold, and the wood didn't creak. I almost felt welcomed. At the bottom, my living room again. Except this one smelled faintly of mildew, and the ceiling in the corner had a brown water stain I'd never seen before. Our coffee table was replaced by a cheaper one. The kind you assemble yourself and regret buying the first time you lean on it. From the kitchen came the sound of my wife's voice. Not humming this time, but muttering something low and clipped. I stepped closer, straining to hear. She was speaking numbers, slowly, repeatedly, like a prayer or a countdown. When she noticed me, she froze mid-sentence, then smiled. couldn't sleep?" she asked her too quickly. The fourth descent happened the very next night. This time, the house was smaller. I mean that literally. The hallway felt narrower, the ceilings lower. The guest room was gone, replaced by a wall. The carpet was frayed and smelled faintly of mold. My wife looked older. Not in years exactly, but in the way her eyes sank deeper, her posture bent forward as though the air here pressed down harder. She also seemed angrier. Every little thing I said was met with an edge. "Stop leaving your shoes in the hall." "Did you even wash this dish?" Her voice was sharp. And her gambling, once a harmless shared vice, now had a manic quality. The kitchen table was littered with scratch tickets, the trash full of losers. The noises from beneath the floor didn't stop anymore. Even during the day, I'd catch the faint murmur of voices, the rhythmic tapping, the slow inhale-exhale of something that knew I was listening. The fifth descent should have been the one where I stopped. When I emerged, our car outside had an extra 30,000 miles on it. The paint was scratched. Inside, my bank account was several $1,000s lighter than it should have been, and my wife was cruel, not subtly, not with sighs or cold silences, but outright mean. "You look tired," she said one night. "You should look tired. You waste all your energy chasing things you don't understand." The way she said it made me pause, because it didn't sound like she was talking about money. I told myself I'd quit. I told myself it wasn't worth the risk anymore. But lying in bed, with the faint tick-tick-tick rising from under the floorboards like a metronome, I felt my skin crawl with the need to go back. What if I could find a better version? What if there was a way up instead of down? The sixth descent was the worst so far. When I came back up, if up is even the right word, we didn't own the house anymore. There were boxes stacked in the living room, and a strange man's jacket hung by the door. I recognized nothing in the kitchen except for my wife's face. And even that wasn't safe, because the look she gave me was pure venom. "You shouldn't be here," she said flatly. From that point on, the spiral accelerated. The house shrank further. Paint peeled from the walls. The roof leaked in 3 places. My job was gone. Debt notices arrived daily. Strangers banged on the door at night, demanding money, sometimes pounding hard enough to make the glass rattle. And always, the stairs were there. I kept going down, sometimes out of desperation, sometimes out of a gambler's hope, sometimes because I was too afraid to not see what had changed. By the 12th descent, I was sure of something I didn't want to admit. Whatever was waiting at the bottom of the stairs, it wasn't a place. It was something, and it was reshaping me one step at a time. By the time I reached what I think was the 13th descent, my wife was gone. Not dead, not missing. Gone in the way a face you know better than your own can suddenly belong to a stranger. She looked the same, mostly. Same curve of the cheekbone, same small scar on her lip from when she tripped on a curb in Vegas years ago. But the light in her eyes was wrong. When she smiled, it was too wide, too even. When she spoke, her pauses came in the wrong places, like she was mimicking speech instead of making it. And when I slept, I woke to find her standing in the doorway, just watching. The house by then was barely ours. The paint on the walls was bubbled from water damage. The living room was cramped with mismatched furniture that smelled of mildew. The hall bathroom door was swollen and wouldn't close all the way. I had no job here, no income. My bank account balance was a number so low it hurt to look at. But the worst part wasn't the poverty or the decay. It was the sense that the house itself wanted me inside, but not safe. Every creak of the floorboards followed me. Every draft seemed to push me toward the living room corner where the stairs would be. And from the vents, I swore I could hear the faint, rhythmic breathing of something too large to be human. I tried staying awake all night to avoid her. On the third attempt, I caught her in the act, standing over me with one hand lifted like she was about to touch my throat. Her fingers hovered there, not shaking, not hesitant, just waiting. When my eyes snapped open, she pulled her hand back with a slow, deliberate grace, her smile a fraction too slow to arrive. "Bad dream?" she asked. Her voice was calm, but the air between us was thick with something I couldn't name. The descents came faster after that, because each version of her was worse than the last. In one, she refused to speak to me at all, just followed me from room to room, her footsteps deliberately matching mine, so I couldn't tell which sound was mine and which was hers. In another, she screamed constantly. Not at me, not even words, just a raw, tearing sound that rattled the windows and made the walls vibrate. But the most dangerous version came on what I think was the 17th descent. I woke up in the living room on the floor, unsure of how I'd gotten there. The air was warm, humid, and the walls were damp to the touch. From the kitchen she called, "Breakfast," in a sing-song voice. When I entered, she was standing by the counter with a knife in her hand. Not cutting anything, just holding it. The blade was clean. Her fingers were white around the handle. "You're up early," I said, my voice trembling. Her head tilted slowly, too slowly, and she gave me a smile I'd never seen her wear. Not in any version of our life. "Not early," she said. "I've been waiting." That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in the hallway with my back against the wall, watching the living room. And at 3:17 a.m., the stairs appeared again. I didn't hesitate. I didn't even look toward the bedroom. The descent was faster than it had ever been, almost as if the stairs themselves were helping me down. When I stepped into the living room this time, it was empty. Too empty. No furniture, no curtains, no sound except for the faint, measured breathing from below the floor. I realized then that I had no idea where below ended. The next morning, she was back, different again, calm, smiling, making coffee, as if nothing had happened. But I knew better. And I knew something else now too. Every time I went down, I was changing with the house. And so was she. By the 20th descent, I no longer thought of the stairs as a choice. They were part of my routine now. Like eating, or breathing, or flinching at the sound of footsteps that weren't mine. I'd go down, see what changed, adapt to the new version of my life. And each time, something was taken from me. A possession, a memory, a piece of myself. Debt collectors started showing up in every version. At first, there were voices on the phone, their threats, a dull roar in my ear. Then, they were pounding on the door, rattling the frame until I thought the hinges would give. Eventually, they didn't even knock, they just came in. Two men in heavy coats, faces hidden under the brim of caps, would stand in the living room and look at me. Not speak, not move, just stare until I left the room. My skin crawling with the certainty that if I said the wrong thing, they'd make me vanish between one breath and the next. My health started to erode. I was thinner in each version, like my body was being whittled away. My skin turned sallow. My hair thinned, then disappeared altogether by the 23rd descent. In one version, my hands shook constantly. The nails cracked and yellowed. My heart fluttered irregularly, sending waves of panic through me without warning. Sometimes I wondered if these were diseases the real me had never had, or if they were gifts from the stairs themselves. And then there was her. The wife I'd known once was long gone, replaced by a parade of versions that seemed built to torment me. In some worlds, she was a stranger who barely acknowledged me. In others, she was my ex, full of venom and old grudges. Once, she was a drunk who screamed at me until her throat gave out, but the worst were the hunters. The first time I saw it in her eyes, I knew. She wasn't angry. She wasn't cruel. She was predatory. Every movement she made was deliberate, calculated to close the distance between us. She'd appear in doorways I hadn't heard her approach, her hands behind her back. She'd follow me into rooms and stand too close. Once, I woke up to find her crouched at the foot of the bed, head tilted at an impossible angle, eyes wide and unblinking. I didn't sleep in that version. I hid in the bathroom with a chair braced against the door until the stairs appeared again. But some nights, I didn't make it to the stairs fast enough. One version ended with me running through the neighborhood barefoot, my lungs tearing, because she'd come at me with a kitchen knife. Another ended in an abandoned warehouse, huddled between rusted shelves, listening to her call my name in a sing-song voice that bounced off the walls. And then came the night I had to kill her. It wasn't my wife, my real wife, but she wore her face. She'd cornered me in the kitchen, the blade flashing in her hand. My back hit the counter. My hand found the handle of a cast iron skillet. It happened fast, too fast. When I stood over her, chest heaving, I didn't feel victory. I felt the stairs, waiting. The next descent brought her back, different again, smiling, sweet, offering me coffee like nothing had happened. I didn't touch it. By now, home was a shifting concept. Sometimes the house was mine. Sometimes it belonged to someone else, and I had to break in just to sleep a few hours. In a few versions, I was already homeless, sleeping under bridges or in parking garages before the stairs would find me again. And always, the changes were for the worse. Not once did the stairs give me a better life. I told myself I was looking for the reset, the version where everything snapped back to the start. But deep down, I knew I wasn't. I was looking for the bottom, because the way the spiral pulled at me, I knew it had to end somewhere, and I had to see it. I don't remember the number of descents anymore. The days blur together because they don't belong to the same world. I wake up in a different place every time. Sometimes in the house, sometimes in an alley, once in a hospital bed with an IV in my arm, and no memory of how I got there. The only constant is the stairs and her. It happened on what I think was the 30th descent. I came up into a version of the living room that was bare. No furniture, no curtains. The wallpaper had been stripped, leaving long curling shreds clinging to the plaster. Dust lay so thick on the floor that my footprints trailed behind me like a breadcrumb path. I thought I was alone until I heard the whisper, "Don't." I turned and she was there. Not the wife I'd left in the last version, But the first one, the real one, or close enough that my heart stuttered. Her hair was longer, streaked with grey now, her face thinner. Her eyes burned the way they had the night she first grabbed my arm. "You found me," she said quietly. I didn't move. My throat was too tight. What happened to you?" Her mouth twisted in a bitter smile. "The same thing that's happening to you." I went down. Again and again, I told myself I'd stop. I didn't. And eventually, she looked away, toward the corner where the stairs were waiting. I realized there's no reset. No way back to the first version. Just the next one. Always the next one. My stomach dropped. Then where does it end? "It doesn't," she said. Her voice was flat, but her hands were trembling. "It's not a circle. It's a spiral. You go down, you lose something. Sometimes it's small. Sometimes it's everything. And one day, you'll descend, and there won't be anything left that was ever yours." I felt cold all over. But why? What's at the bottom? She looked at me for a long time, her eyes glistening in the half-light. "I don't think there is a bottom. I think the stairs are the bottom. And they just keep going." She stepped closer, and her voice dropped to a whisper. "You have to stop." For a moment, I wanted to believe her. I wanted to turn away, walk back through the dust and into whatever life this version had left me. But over her shoulder, I could hear it. That faint, steady breathing from below the floor, matching mine, inviting me. "I can't," I said. My voice cracked on the words. "Not until I know." Her face crumpled. She shook her head like she was watching me walk into traffic. "Then you're already gone," she whispered. I didn't watch her leave. I turned toward the stairs. The air spilling from them was heavier than ever, almost pulling me forward. My legs felt like they belonged to someone else as I took the first step down. Then the second. Then the third. I don't know how long I descended. Time doesn't exist in that place. The darkness thickened around me, pressing in until it felt like I was walking inside a lung. The wood beneath my feet was warm now, faintly pulsing. And then I was standing in a living room again. Except this time, it wasn't mine. It wasn't anyone's. The walls were bare concrete. The air was damp and metallic. There was no door, no window, just 4 walls, and the stairs behind me, vanishing upward into black. And in the center of the room, something moved. It wasn't human. It was too tall, its limbs too long, its head cocked at a slow, listening angle. I couldn't see its face, if it had one, but I could feel it smiling. The breathing I'd heard for months was here with me now, each inhale deep enough to bend the air. I tried to step back toward the stairs, but the wall was there instead. The creature tilted its head the other way. Then it spoke, just 2 words. "Your turn." I don't remember what happened next, but I know this. I woke up in another version. The house is still here, smaller than ever. She's here too, but not mine. And the stairs are waiting in the corner, patient as always. I tell myself every night that I won't go down again. But when the breathing starts, I know I will, because the spiral doesn't stop. And now, I'm part of it.